Hi, welcome to the Catholic Corner. I'm Monsignor Walter Nolan. My guest today is the Vincentian Father. It works very well with us in our diocese, Father Marty McGeough. Father Marty is the coordinator of jail and prison ministry in the Diocese of Trenton. He's worked in the prison here in New Jersey for the past year, but he has a lot of experience volunteering in prisons way before that, probably for at least 6 years or so, Marty, huh? Mm-hmm. Father Marty also speaks Spanish, and he certainly celebrates religious Catholic services for our Hispanic brothers and sisters. Before we begin our discussion, Father Marty, I'd like to just read a little excerpt, if I can, from a statement by the United States Catholic Bishops titled Responsibility, Rehabilitation, and Restoration, a Catholic Perspective on Crime and Criminal Justice, and it was issued November 15, the year 2000. In some ways, an approach to criminal justice that is inspired by a Catholic vision is a paradox. We cannot and will not tolerate behavior that threatens lives and violates the rights of others. We believe in responsibility, accountability, and legitimate punishment. Those who harm others or damage property must be held accountable for the hurt they've caused. The community has a right to establish and enforce laws to protect people and to advance the common good. But at the same time, a Catholic approach does not give up on those who violate these laws. We believe that both victims and offenders, of course, are children of God. Despite the very different claims on society, their lives and dignity should be protected and respected. We seek justice, not vengeance. We believe punishment must be clear and have a clear purpose, protecting society and rehabilitating those who violate the law. That says an awful lot, Father Marty. You're the coordinator of jail and prison ministry. You know, can we speak about that? How does that resonate with you and your ministry and work? And I mean, there's so many sides to everything in life, and yet Christ is always at our center.
Well, thank you for inviting me today to discuss this issue of prison ministry. When I got the job here in the diocese to become the coordinator, I read the bishop's letter, and I think the first thing that really struck me, as you talked about there, the notion of being worried about the victim. If somebody who's preached the Gospels for a number of years now, I never thought of the Gospel of the Good Samaritan other than as a story of helping somebody who was down and out. Until I read that letter, when the bishops in that letter made a point of saying that the parable of the Good Samaritan is the story of a victim of crime. And it was like, it took me aback to think about that. And that has to be a part of, I think, the church's overall ministry, and even part of what my office should get around to doing. I can't say that we're doing that now, but it has struck me very much how the gospel spoke to that situation. That's on the one side. And then where I do spend a lot more of my time are with those who have committed crimes against people in society. And I've seen them in the prisons and in the jails that are located here in the Diocese of Trenton. And I've seen all sides of their responses and acceptance or non-acceptance of their responsibility for what they've done. And so there is that sense, in terms of what the bishops have said, of being aware of both sides, both parties in the whole issue of ministering for people involved in prisons or people who've been hurt by those who are in prison. So,
when you talk, Father Marty, I guess my thought is that the victimization kind of starts to spread out. It's like the pebble in the pond, when the ripples go out. Mm-hmm. It's certainly a person who's hurt or offended. Certainly it's the person who did the offending. But then law enforcement officers get involved, families get involved, judges get involved, prayerful people like yourself get involved, and somehow or other you're saying to yourself, how do we keep all of these little ripples so that we can help everybody with the love of Christ?
Well, that particular gospel came up this summer, and because the way I do the ministry, all my masses that I say in prison, whatever the day of the week may happen to be, I use the Sunday readings. And so when the Good Samaritan came up, I said, I'm going to talk to the guys about their victims, and to talk with them about being sorrowful for what they've done to people. And so it was a very interesting week because I had about 6 or 7 different masses in different institutions, and was always the same gist for the sermon, which was to talk about the people whom they had hurt. Only one person really didn't seem to feel like they had done something that they felt they were defending themselves. Others, one, it was interesting, it was somebody who was in prison for vehicular manslaughter. He had gotten drunk and hit and killed somebody.
Sure.
And it was very close to the anniversary of that accident. And so as I talked about this particular person, he said, he says, I had really thought about that the other night, Father. He says, just remembering that person, remembering what I had done and how, I'd hurt his life. And he was truly remorseful for what he had done. Now, the person that he hit unfortunately died, so it's not ever going to be a case where he can really say to this person, other than through a prayerful means of saying, I'm sorry for what I did and for, how I killed you and how I hurt your family. And I would judge he was truly sincere about what he felt. So there is that sense in which some of them do feel for the people they've victimized.
And what I mentioned a minute ago was that in a situation even like that, the victims are on both sides of the family because the person you're talking about is now incarcerated, but left the family back home. It's just, there are so many facets, of some justice, and boy, how I just think of folks like yourself who bring God's love. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy love always to bring on with various factors going on. I always had a thought in my mind, which is, I don't know if it's a good thought or not, but I guess we all sit back and ponder things and ponder God's justice and how we should do things and how do we ever forgive or not forgive, and life's just not always easy. But I often wondered sometimes if folks that we might have even hurt in any way, shape, or form have gone before us. I often wondered if they're up in heaven with the blessedness of God, whose love goes out into compassion and forgiveness, if they're not up there praying for us in the sense of saying, someday.
I would hope so.
Well, that's the idea that. We're here on earth for what, 80 years? The scripture says 80 good years, and after that, you're
70
blessed.
is the sum of our years, 80 if we are strong.
Yeah, but there is an eternity that sometimes we have to make sure our faith points to that also. But yet we're so human, and we live in the human condition and the human hurts and the human frailties. And
I've found very recently in the last couple of weeks in preaching with these readings at this time is that the image of heaven, when shall we say you're right now at this moment living in hell, really looks good, because they really have that sense of just, anything and everything has got to be better than what they are living in right here and right now. Even to the point where, for some of them, the heaven means never having to wear an orange jumpsuit again for the rest of their lives. So, just being able to choose your clothes, being able to,
Unless we all have orange jumpsuits in heaven.
There's a lot of inmates, if heaven is orange jumpsuits, they're not going to be happy with God.
Well, maybe if we all have the same jumpsuit, we'll all be brothers and sisters. That's it's so nice to be able to be with you. What's your basic role as the coordinator? You mentioned a couple of things, but I know our good bishop somehow contacted you to come to our diocese because we needed some help in this area.
Yes, the bishop is a Vincentian also, and he needed somebody because the priest who had the job before me, a very, very dedicated diocesan man named Bob Schultz, had begun to have some health difficulties. And so he called the provincial, Mike Carroll in Philadelphia, and he mentioned this need that he had. And I was in between assignments, and when I came into the provincial's office, he said, David needs somebody to go to jail in New Jersey. And we call him David, but don't tell the rest of the diocesan guy. But I thought about it, and I just said, well, tell me a little bit more about this. And, so I then came over and I got the job. I see my job as there's two facets to my job. There's what I do in the prison, and then there's what I do outside of the prison. In the prison, I believe I would say I'm a sacramental presence because in almost all of them, I'm going to say Mass for the prisoners who are there.
And do you say Mass every day, once a week? How does that?
I say Mass on various days in various prisons. There's only one place in Bordentown, Alfred Wagner, which is up the road a piece, and I say Mass there twice a month on a Sunday night. Other than that, I have no Sunday Masses in prison on Sunday because it's a visitor's day. And if I go in there, people got to choose between me and God or possibly their family.
Sure.
So we don't do that. Sure. But I go into, once a month I go to the state prison in Trenton, which is the maximum security place, and I have Mass there. Now, Sister Liz Ganam, who...
Great saint.
Yes,
oh my gosh, what a
wonderful,
beautiful saint.
wonderful woman. She's been there 25 years in that place. And she has a number of priests who come in every Monday and say Mass for the inmates there. Generally, we get about 60 to 70 men who will come down. Tomorrow, I'll be at Craft and usually at Jones Farms, which are also part of the state system. I'll get from 7 to 8 at those two Masses that I have. Wednesday night, I have a Mass at a state hospital in West Trenton. Thursday night, I'm either at Fort Dix, which is a federal prison, or Mid-State, which is medium security. And Fort Dix, I have Mass in, that's one of the where I have Mass in Spanish. And then Mid-State is in English. Once a month on a Saturday, I go to Burlington County Jail. So there's different places where I go. Fortunately, there's a couple of places. There's about 14 jails or prisons within the diocese. And I've got a couple of other priests, Father Leon Booney in Toms River and Father Francisco Sayanes, who take Masses in Monmouth and Ocean County, and so they're there. But in the prison, I'm a sacramental presence because I either say Mass, a lot of times I will hear confessions for the men who want to go. Probably one of my best days was very early on. I had confessions in one of the places. I started at 8:30 in the morning and finished at 2:30 in the afternoon. I don't think in my entire priestly life I've ever had a day where I had as many people saying, I've done this in 30, 40, or 50 years. And so you just feel like you're making a real difference, sacramentally with them. And the outside part is the diocese wants me to find volunteers, lay volunteers from our parishes who will also do prison ministry in various places. We're right now in the process of getting about 30 people who we hope early on in the year to get into some of our state prisons. And we put out a call to parishes in Mercer and several in Burlington County, because most of our state prisons were within this area, and got about 30 people, and we've been kind of trying to get them trained so that they'll understand what they're getting into. Now, they will do things like religious education, Bible study. Some of them may do communion services, or they'll bring in communion, for the men or the women. In the county jails, we would also have women prisoners. So their state facility for women is not in our diocese, so I don't go there. But we're trying to get these people, and we've got about 30 right now. And the thing about the people that I see, and I hope that it will hold after they walk through the door the first time and they get the clang of the door behind them, is that the enthusiasm and the desire to do this will stay there, and that they'll continue with this, because right now they seem really anxious to go in and to do this work. So, and I'm hoping early next year that I may be able to do a similar program with a group of Spanish volunteers. I got the potential for some, and I'm hoping that might have by January about 18 or 19 people that we can also get in to deal with our Hispanic population that are incarcerated. It would be especially good if we could get some of the Spanish-speaking into the Monmouth County Jail, which is also an INS holding area for people waiting for deportation. So,
If someone is in a prison, can they request to see you as a priest?
yes, that part of their religious freedom is that they can ask for a pastoral visit. Mm-hmm. And the prisons are supposed to, allow for that.
So then you would set up a time with the authorities to
Yes.
to do that.
Yes.
Father Marty, do you also deal with their families in some way? When someone is in prison, I mean, do you ever have any reason to contact their family, or could the family contact you and
Technically, we're not allowed.
Not allowed to do
Not
that.
allowed by law. Volunteers or other chaplains are not allowed to deal with their families. They feel that would prejudice.
Sure.
the thing.
Sure. I guess there's got to be some do's and don'ts on both sides to make sure that everything's done in good order,
Yes.
and everybody understands
Yes.
I hope the folks that you're dealing with, that you're training to be part of this ministry, understand that there's a great fulfillment of bringing, God's beatitudes. I mean, it's always easy, not easy all the time, but sometimes it's easier, to take care of a poor person out here than a poor person that might be, incarcerated or what have you. I do a little bit of work at a hospital, and sometimes there are prisoners at the hospital, going to be operated on or whatever. And my own experience is that they're so grateful, of your prayer or your blessing, and and what always strikes me a lot is sometimes we'll say the prayers, and I might be leaving the room, and somebody will say, "And Father, bless you too," And I think when people experience that other side, we realize that there's a lot of goodness that's maybe we just gotta tilt it.
I don't think I've ever done anything in my entire priestly life where I have been so consistently been thanked
Right.
for showing up.
Right.
They just Hey, Father, thanks for coming. And it's not just, for me, I mean, I see and hear the same thing from, the lay volunteers who, throughout this diocese, who've been doing that, and they will all say the same thing, that the gratitude of the inmates who know that there's a lot of people who don't want to see them, and a lot of people who wonder why we're wasting our time on them. Well, I don't see it as a waste of my time. So.
No, I think, myself, Father Marty, when, sometimes when people are hurt, it's hard to get over that hurt, and we understand that. But I do sit down in prayer and just think of the compassion of Christ. And only maybe a God could have so much compassion that we struggle sometimes to have ourselves. But it is a beautiful thing when you do see that transforming love of Christ on either side, so to speak. And sometimes, maybe not all the time, but sometimes there is a blessing with each other that we can understand that there can be a prayer with each other or for each other anyway.
There was a sense that I got a year ago on Good Friday. I was in the state prison at Trenton, and we were doing the church's service for Good Friday. And we came to the part where we had the veneration of the cross. Now, they just had a very small cross, which was put on a table about the size of this. And each inmate came up to that little table, knelt down, prayed, picked up the cross, kissed it, put it back down, got up, went back to their chair. And now there's a kind of a devotional thing that the inmates seem to do, to where they will kneel down in front of a chair and they put their heads into the seat. And each of them was doing this. And I just sat there. And the only thing I could think of was that what I was viewing was a living representation of the first beatitude, blessed are the poor in spirit, which I think is badly translated, but that's for scripture. I like the Spanish translation better, because they'll say, blessed, it comes down to, blessed are those who have the spirit of the poor.
Yeah.
And what you'd seen were men who had tried everything else, and now had come to the realization that the only thing that was left was God. And you could see that in the way in which they treated the cross.
Wow.
I just felt like I wasn't in prison on that day. I felt like I was in a very, very holy place with a group of holy people.
Oh, I'm sure you were in many, many, many ways. Can I read another little excerpt from the bishops, and maybe you can help me? Just as God never abandons us, so we too must be in covenant with one another. We're all sinners, and our response to sin and failure should not be abandonment and despair, but rather justice, contrition, reparation, and return or reintegration of all into the community. The New Testament builds on this tradition and extends it. Jesus demonstrated his disappointment with those who oppressed others, Matthew 23, and those who defiled sacred spaces. At the same time, he rejected punishment for its own sake, noting that we are all sinners, in John chapter 8. Jesus also rejected revenge and retaliation, and was ever hopeful that offenders would transform their lives and turn to be embraced by God's love. We've already talked about some of your experiences, maybe other experiences that might bring out that a little bit more, if you can kind of resonate with some of that.
The first thing that strikes me is the word abandonment, because that's one of the things that I hear from time to time with them. One man at the Burlington County Prison, and he wasn't Catholic, but he always came to Mass, and he had a great singing voice, and so I invited him to sing after communion. And he got up this one night, and he spoke about how my presence and the presence of the other religious volunteers who had come in basically told them that God had not abandoned them. And so that our presence addressed, what the bishops were talking about, because they do have that sense of abandonment. There are those whose families have said, "We've had it with you. You've done us in for the last time. We don't want to deal with you anymore." And so they do feel that abandonment. And so when we go in there and we tell them that God loves them, that God came to save them, that they feel that and they appreciate that. And that's where we were talking before about gratitude, and I think that's where their gratitude comes from. Someone, God, has not abandoned them. And any time that I or the religious volunteers who go into the prisons go in with that attitude, and they say that to the men or the women, it really resonates with them, because they do have that feeling of abandonment. And I think, when you talk about John 8, part of that sense is that Jesus forgives the woman, but he doesn't just let her off the hook. He said, go and don't sin again. Don't do this again. So, and I think that there has to be that sense of also challenging these folks to, to change their lives and to be better.
But I guess, Father Marty, that's all of our jobs, isn't it? Because it's we can tell someone to transform your life, but then we have to have the availability of something that they can transform their lives. It's all, it gets a little complex, but sometimes
it's very complex when they're getting out, and the whole issue of reentry, with the problems that they have, because many of them will be dealing with drug addictions. They're going to get out and they're going to have great problems finding employment. If the families have abandoned them, there's no place for them to go. There's a lot of issues. We're trying in one small way to working with the St. Vincent de Paul Society.
Don't stop and don't lose your spirit, and I hope many people come to help with their own love. Father Marty, thank you so much. I'd like to get you back. I got more thoughts about it. Please pray with us, for us. Let's all have the compassion of our Christ, and hopefully we can help each other, forgive each other, bless each other, and transform all of our lives together. Pray with us. Thank you. And if you want to be in touch, dioceseoftrenton.org. Please love someone who needs a little bit of love. Thanks, Marty. Thank you. Really.